The girl they left behind. The galaxy moved fast. Wars ended. Empires rose. Names vanished like dust blown off forgotten tablets. But one name, one voice refused to be erased. She had once been called Zureya. Once now. She had no name, no title, no rank, only a body that no longer moved from the waist down and a mind that had seen too much. She was found inside a rusting medical pod, left to rot at the edge of a deserted mining outpost. The pod was broken. The stasis unit failed, life support barely functioning. Someone had jammed a rusted plate into the ID scanner to prevent it from broadcasting. They hadn't wanted her rescued, they'd wanted her gone. Jack Devrin wasn't supposed to be there. He was just a salvager human, solitary and stubborn. He wandered the galaxy in a patchwork freighter called the Lumadrift, collecting scrap and fixing old tech in exchange for credits, food or peace and quiet. But something had made him stop that day. A weak, flickering distress beacon, barely stronger than static. He almost ignored it. Almost he didn't. He found the pod by accident buried beneath crates, wrapped in silence, and covered in a blanket of forgotten time. The moment he opened the hatch, her eyes opened too, wide, glowing faintly, terrified. She didn't speak, couldn't. Her throat was dry, her body rigid, legs unmoving. Jack didn't ask questions. He gave her water, lifted her gently out of the pod, wrapped her in a warm emergency blanket, and without another word, carried her onto his ship. That's how it started. He didn't know her name. She didn't know if she still had one for 2 full days. She barely moved or made a sound. Jack had set her up in the medical bay-clean sheets, basic care unit, soft lights. He spoke only when necessary, asking if she needed anything, never pushing. She never answered, but her eyes followed him. On the 3rd day he found her awake, staring out the viewport. Stars feel far, she whispered, voice dry like smoke. Jack blinked. You're awake. She didn't look at him. Why, what, why pick me up? Jack shrugged. Didn't feel right to leave you. A long silence. They did, she said. They left me. He didn't push. Jack wasn't a therapist. He wasn't a hero. But he understood isolation. He knew the kind of silence that echoed from within. By the end of the week, she told him her name. Zureya, she said, eyes locked on the floor. Used to mean something. He nodded. Still does. She didn't believe him. Not yet. Body was weak. Atrophied muscles. Old injuries poorly treated. Spine damage irreversible by her species tech. Her legs didn't respond. Her hands trembled when she tried to lift a spoon. Her mind was still sharp, but she hated herself for it. Jack made no comment when she failed to eat without dropping the spoon. He simply picked it up, set it down again, and waited. When she cried, he left the room quietly. He installed a hover chair and retrofitted the ship's hallways to accommodate her. He never explained why, just did it. One evening she caught him modifying an old entertainment panel. He was adding ancient Earth media to its drive. When she asked what it was, he said, laughter. You'll hate it. He was wrong. She watched her first Earth comedy that night. Her brow furrowed at first, then softened. No one's dying, she said, confused. Exactly, Jack replied. Her lips twitched. The next day, she asked for another episode. By the end of the week, she asked what popcorn was. Zureya's voice grew stronger. Slowly her hands steadied. She asked Jack what it was like growing up on Earth. He told her stories of rain and grass and music in crowded cafes. She listened, eyes distant, as if trying to remember something long buried. Then, one night, while sipping warm tea Jack had brewed, she asked the question that had lived quietly inside her chest. Why are you doing all this? He looked up. Because you matter. I can't walk. I can't help you. I'm dead weight. He leaned forward. You're not a tool. I'm not keeping you because I need something. I just didn't want you to be alone. She stared into her cup for a long time, then whispered, no one's ever said that to me, not even my own people. Jack said nothing, just sat beside her as the ship drifted through the stars. Later that night, long after he had gone to sleep, Zureya wheeled into the cargo bay. There, tucked under a tarp, she saw it, a pile of parts, metal rods, wires, servo modules, an exo-frame. He was building it. For her, she reached out, hand shaking, and touched a central brace. Her reflection shimmered in the polished steel. Broken, but not forgotten. And maybe not broken at all. The shape of healing, the exo-frame sat silently in the workshop, its parts laid out in a gentle circle like a machine in prayer. Zureya couldn't sleep. The quiet hum of the Lumadrift was like a heartbeat around her, steady and slow, as if even the ship itself was holding its breath. She reached out again, brushing her fingers along a curved support beam. It was smooth, recently polished. Jack had been careful. Everything in it had been chosen for her height, her weight, her condition. This wasn't some salvaged war tech. This wasn't a combat suit. That this was something different. That it was. Kind Zaraya pulled her hand back. She wasn't ready, not yet. But something inside her stirred. A twitch of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. By the time Jack entered the workshop the next morning, bleary-eyed and yawning, he noticed it immediately. One piece of the exo frame, the left leg support, had been moved. Not much, just an inch out of place. He said nothing, just smiled to himself. Zaraya hovered past the entrance an hour later, trying not to look like she'd been there. Jack caught her glance. You touched it? No. You did. A pause. Maybe, you want to try it? No, he shrugged. All right, but when you're ready, I'll help. Zaraya stared at the floor, jaw tight. You really believe I can do it? Jack didn't look up from the calibrator he was working on. I believe you'll surprise yourself. For the first time in years, Zaraya didn't feel the conversation was about proving something. It was about discovering something, reclaiming something. That evening, she returned. This time, Jack didn't say a word. He simply sat nearby while she studied the frame. Her hands hovered over the pieces, sockets for her hips, stabilizers for her knees, pressure sensors at the base of the feet. She'd worn suits before. Heavy ones. War tech forged for front lines and planetary assaults. But they were always meant for one thing: destruction. This was different. This was healing, shaped into steel. By the end of the week, she was ready. The first fitting was painful. The supports pinched, the braces rubbed. Every wire felt too tight, every step a mountain. The servos groaned, adjusting to her weight distribution. And then she stood. 3 seconds. She fell forward into Jack's arms, breath shaking, eyes wet. With more than just pain, I stood, you stood. Zaraya didn't cry like she used to, quietly, silently, ashamed. She wept loudly, arms wrapped around Jack's shoulders, chest heaving like her lungs couldn't hold in the feeling she had stood. Jack didn't say anything. He just held her. The next day, she insisted they try again. She stood for 6 seconds, then 10. On the 5th try, she took a step. The step wasn't graceful. It was a lurch, a wobble, a catch of breath and weight, but it was a step. She fell again. This time, she laughed. Jack clapped like a proud father. That's it. Stop clapping, you sap. Too late. In the following days, her steps improved. Her grip steadied. She moved through the ship's hallway like a child learning to walk against stumbling, bracing, adapting. But with each step, her posture straightened. Zaraya stopped wearing the hover chair, even when it hurt. Even when she fell, she refused to go back to it. One evening, as the stars drifted silently past the viewport, she sat beside Jack in the common room, legs rested in the braces, a warm teacup balanced in her gloved hand. I used to be a commander, she said suddenly. Jack turned to her. I figured, he said. You move like someone who used to give orders. She looked at him, with surprise. You never asked. You weren't ready. I think I am now, so she told him. About the war, the Red Eclipse campaign, how she had been the daughter of High General Vore, trained from birth in tactics and weaponry, how she'd commanded fleets, planned planetary sieges, signed death. Warrenstein told him about the mission that went wrong, how her own ship had been sabotaged, how she crashed on an asteroid moon, her legs crushed in the wreck. She waited 2 days for rescue. It never came. Her people declared her dead because that was easier than admitting they'd left her behind. They didn't want to save me, she whispered. I was broken in their eyes. Broken things are no longer useful. Jack's jaw clenched. Then they never deserved you. She looked at him. I'm still broken, she said. Jack shook his head. No, you're healing. Zaraya stared at the stars beyond the window. They didn't seem so far now. I don't know who I am without war, she said. Jack finished his tea and leaned back. Maybe you get to decide that now. For a moment, they sat in silence. Then Zaraya did something she hadn't done in years. Smiled. Not the half-hearted smirk she'd given him once or twice. A full, warm, real smile. Thank you, Jack. He looked at her, eyes steady. Anytime Zaraya that night, long after the lights dimmed, Zaraya recorded her first log since the accident. Her voice was quiet, but no longer afraid. This is Zaraya. I took 12 steps today. I didn't fall. I laughed. I remembered who I used to be, and for the first time, I didn't feel pain when I did. I'm not walking to go back. I'm walking to go forward. Jack believes in me, and maybe I'm starting to believe in me too. She paused, then whispered, I think I'm still alive. The signal and the scar. The days passed like whispered chapters, quiet, warm, and slow. Zureya learned how to move without stumbling, how to lift herself from the floor, how to adjust the suit's torque when her muscles refused to answer. Was always nearby, never hovering, never rushing. He let her fall, let her rise, let her become someone again, but not everything was healing. Some things were hiding, she still hadn't told him about the badge, not fully. Jack found it while digging through an old crate in his cargo. By a dark black emblem carved with a sharp, talon-like crest, alien stone, polished to a mirror shine. Not human. He brought it to her without much thought. Found something strange, looks military. Zureya saw it and froze. The light in the room seemed to vanish. Her fingers curled around the hover armrest, knuckles pale. Where did you get that? She asked, voice barely a whisper, in one of the sealed boxes, left behind by whoever sabotaged the outpost. She didn't answer, didn't look at him, just stared, and then she turned and wheeled away without another word. Jack didn't press, but that night she came to his quarters. Her eyes were red, her voice was raw. I was once someone important, she said, standing just outside his door. You should know who you're traveling with. Jack nodded and stepped aside. Come in. She walked in, no hover chair, no suit, just braces and resolve. I was General Vor's daughter, she said, as she sat down slowly. Not just a soldier, Jack. I was command, Zoric military elite. I planned entire orbital campaigns before I turned 20. He stayed quiet, listened. I led troops who swore blood oaths to me. I gave speeches in the grand halls. I stood before the council and called them weak, and they cheered. Jack watched her expression flicker, but then I got hurt. The words came slowly, like peeling rust off metal. My cruiser was sabotaged. We were about to win a campaign that would have shifted the balance of the outer rim, but someone planted a grav fault in the engine. I was the only survivor. She clenched her fists. I waited for rescue. I waited for my people, my brothers, my command, but no one came. Her voice broke. They told the council I was dead, not missing, not wounded, dead, because admitting I was alive meant admitting they left me. Jack exhaled slowly. You were erased. She looked up. You understand too well. She hesitated. They said I was a stain on our victory, that letting me live would show weakness. Then they never knew what strength was. Zureya closed her eyes. They erased me from the records. The badge you found, it was mine. Jack set it down on the table between them. I don't care who you were, he said, only who you're becoming. She smiled faintly. That's what scares me. I don't know yet. He leaned forward. That's the best part. The next morning Zureya was up before Jack. She was in the engine room, soldering wires with shaky but focused hands. The exoframe had become more than support. It was her ritual, now dressing in strength, calibrating her motion. A new kind of armor. Jack entered mid-breakfast, rubbing his eyes. You're already working. She turned. I couldn't sleep. He noticed the badge clipped to the side of her hip brace. She didn't mention it. Neither did he, but they both noticed later that day. A red light blinked on the command console. Jack leaned in, frowning. Unidentified. Vessel approaching. No beacon. Zureya entered the cockpit behind him, fully suited. Her eyes scanned the display. Show me. He pulled up the visual feed. A sleek black ship, Zorak design, darting through asteroid cover. No lights, no transponder. Her face paled. High order enforcement class. Jack blinked. From your people. She nodded. They're not here to talk. As if on cue, the comms crackled. A deep grating voice echoed across the ship. This is Commander Traz of Zorak High Command. You are harboring a fugitive. Release her immediately, or face elimination. Jack stood slowly. Zureya didn't move. She's not a fugitive, he said coldly. She's a survivor. The voice laughed. That survivor is a traitor who defied her command, disgraced her lineage, and shamed the council. Zureya stepped forward and activated the comm mic. Her voice cut through the channel, calm and firm. I didn't shame the council. You shamed yourselves when you left me to die. There was a long pause, then came the hiss of a missile lock. Jack shouted, brace. An impact shook the ship. Shields flared. Consoles sparked. They were under attack. Jack dove for the pilot seat. Zureya moved to weapons. You ever used human cannons before? He yelled. Double quotes, no. But I've blown up bigger things with fewer buttons. The ship rocked again as another blast hit the outer hull. Zureya gritted her teeth and fired back. One of the enemy's escorts exploded in a white flash. Another tried to flank. Jack spun the Luma drift to the right and released a burst of chaff, masking their escape vector. Zureya's voice was sharp. They'll board us. They want me alive. Jack's grip tightened. Not if I burn them first. Suddenly, warning sirens screamed. They're docking, Zaraya shouted. Jack grabbed his blaster. You know how to fight in that suit. She looked at him with steel in her eyes. I didn't forget everything. The hatch exploded. Zorok enforcers poured in, 4 soldiers clad in obsidian armor. Jack dropped 2 in the first blast. The third charged, slamming into Zaraya. She twisted mid-impact, using her exosuit's enhanced strength to flip him over her shoulder and into a steel wall. The 4th soldier froze. You're supposed to be paralyzed, he muttered. Stepped forward, supposed to be. One punch ended him. Silence returned. Smoke curled in the air. Sparks danced across the floor. Jack looked at her. You good? She nodded. Double quote. Better than ever. The cum crackled again. Commander Traz, you've made your choice, he said. Very well, the council will know. Zaraya pressed the mic button, then let them hear my voice for the first time in years, and she cut the line. Jack turned to her. Why now? She looked out the viewport, jaw set. Because they came for me while I was still learning to walk. She turned back. To him, next time, I'll be running. The warrior returns. The ship floated in silence for a long time after the battle. Zaraya stood in the training bay. The metal floor cold beneath her suit's reinforced feet. Her breathing was steady, her muscles tense but unshaken. Jack watched her from the hallway. She hadn't said a word since Trass's voice went silent on the cum. He knew that silence. Well, it wasn't fear, it was focus. For days afterward, Zaraya didn't ask for help. She began waking earlier, training longer, repairing the dents in her suit herself. When she wasn't walking laps around the Luma drift, she was in the simulator room Jack had rigged up from salvaged VR panels and old neural response gloves. He didn't question her, didn't stop her, but he watched closely. Was evolving. The girl who once trembled in silence now moved with intent, controlled, sharp. Her balance improved, her reflexes returned, and her stare. It could cut steel. She was no longer just surviving, she was preparing. One evening after a particularly long training session, she joined Jack in the tiny ship kitchen, her forehead damp with sweat, her cheeks flushed, her suit partially disengaged. He offered her water. She took it without speaking. After a few quiet sips, she finally said, "Ready?" Jack didn't answer immediately. He set down his cup, eyes narrowed. Ready for what? She turned to face him, her voice calm. To go back. To show them I didn't vanish. To stand in front of the council. Jack leaned back in his chair. They tried to kill you. They'll try again. I know. Then why go? Zaraya looked down at her hand scarred, rebuilt, strengthened by struggle. Because I'm not afraid anymore. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right. That night, the Luma drift received a distress signal. A human cargo vessel was under attack coordinates deep in the unguarded zones of neutral space. Pirates, most likely. Jack almost dismissed it too far. Too risky. But Zaraya was already strapping into her suit. We go, she said. Jack raised an eyebrow. Why the sudden heroics? She looked him dead in the eyes. Because someone answered my distress signal once. He couldn't argue with that. They dropped out of FTL 2 hours later into chaos. A large civilian freighter was surrounded by 3 smaller pirate ships. The freighter's shields were flickering, one engine on fire, escape pods disabled. Military escort, no allies in sight. Zaraya didn't wait. She launched from the outer hatch in her modified expo frame. Using the maneuvering thrusters Jack had installed on her shoulders, she soared like a comet, landing on the first pirate vessel with a bone-shaking crash. Jack watched on the screens, awestruck. The woman who once couldn't lift a spoon now tore open a pressurized airlock with her bare hands, dropped into the cockpit, and smashed the pilot's console with one powered punch. The ship spiraled out of control, venting gas and flame, before slamming into a dead drift. Before the second pirate crew could react, Zaraya had already leaped across the void, landed on their wing, and jammed a stun grenade into their intake vent. Boom. Disabled. 1 to go. The third ship tried to flee. It wasn't fast enough. Zaraya tore a hole through its hull, ripped its core from the inside, and disabled it without killing a single crew member. When she returned to the Luma drift, her armor was scorched, her eyes tired, and her knuckles. Robert, she was smiling. The freighter's captain hailed them, confused and shaken. Who in the galaxy was that? The voice asked. Jack leaned into the cum and smiled. Someone they said was broken. Later, as the stars drifted by once more, Jack wrapped a bandage around Zaraya's hand. You didn't have to do all that alone, he said. She smirked. I didn't. You came with me. He paused. You're not the same person I found in that pod. She shook her head. No, but I still remember her. They sat quietly for a while. The kind of quiet that wasn't empty but full of everything. They didn't need to say. Finally, Zaraya stood on her own, without support, without a hover chair. "I'm not afraid of them anymore," she said. Jack looked up. "Then what are you afraid of?" She hesitated, not knowing what comes next. He stood too, and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Then let's find out together." The next morning they approached the Zorak capital, a colossal city ship shaped like a serpent, coiled in the orbit of a dying star. Golden obsidian towers jutted into space. The airspace was thick with guard vessels and patrol drones. As they neared, Zuraya's hand tightened around the railing. She hadn't seen this place since they erased her name. Jack didn't ask if she was ready. He could see it in the way she stood tall. UNMOVING. As the Luma drift docked, armed guards flooded the platform, weapons drawn. "Do not resist," one barked. "Zaraya of the Fallen House, you are under arrest for impersonation and trespassing in royal airspace." Zaraya stepped forward. "I am Zaraya of House Vor," she said. "Daughter of High General Vor. I am not here to impersonate. I am here to speak." The guards hesitated. The name still carried weight. An order crackled through their cums. "Bring her to the High Council." As she and Jack were escorted through the long marble halls of the capital, past statues of warriors and traitors alike, Zuria whispered to Jack without turning her head, "This was once my home. Is it still?" She was quiet for a moment. "Might be again." They entered the grand chamber, where the High Council waited 7 elders in dark robes, sitting on thrones carved from volcanic glass. Beside them stood Commander Traz, his face smug and venomous. "She returns," Traz said, wearing human armor, begging for recognition. Zaraya walked to the center of the chamber and did not bow. "I bled for this empire. I fought for its people. You left me to die, then buried my name." The head counselor frowned. "You were injured. You lost value." "No," she said. "You lost honor." Traz stepped forward. "She is a fraud, nothing but a ghost." Zaraya turned to face them all. "I invoke the ancient right," she said. "Combat by trial. If I win, my name is restored. My record cleared. Every file that marked me as dead, deleted." Gasps filled the room. "That right is for warriors," one counselor said. She looked at them, steel in her voice. "I am a warrior." And Jack, standing just behind her, added without hesitation, "She's the best I've ever seen." The chamber fell into tense silence. Then the head counselor raised a ceremonial staff and slammed it against the floor. "So be it." The arena of Truther Arena was nothing like Zuraya remembered. Once she had stood in its center as a decorated prodigy command, ribbons pinned across her chest, soldiers chanting her name in cadence. The stone had been polished then, the banners had flown. Now the floor bore battle scars, pits from previous duels, burn marks from energy weapons, blood still clinging to the cracks. Thousands watched from the domed tiers above Zorak nobles, military officers, civilians who had only heard her name in whispers. Screens broadcasted the event live across colonies and border worlds. No one expected much. After all, the council had declared her dead. Jack stood behind the security line at the edge of the arena's platform, arms folded, eyes focused. He'd been offered a seat among visiting guests but refused. He wanted to be close just in case. Zaraya stepped forward into the arena's center. Her exosuit was freshly tuned, black and silver. It moved like liquid metal across her frame. The sun lamps above the dome bathed her in light, giving her a faint glow. She didn't wave, she didn't bow. She just stood at the far end of the arena. Commander Traz entered to a roar of applause. His armor was heavy, ceremonial, and red plating across his shoulders gleamed like polished blood. A retractable plasma halberd rested in his hands. He smirked across the arena at her. "The cripple rises," he said into his mic, loud enough for all to hear. "Will she fall again for us today?" Zaraya didn't respond. A silence fell. Then the bell sounded. Traz charged first fast for someone in heavy armor. His halberd slashed across the air in a sizzling arc. Zaraya sidestepped, not retreating but slipping, like wind around a blade. Her counter-strike hit him in the ribs, a palm thrust reinforced by her suit's kinetic servos. He staggered. She didn't chase. Traz roared and attacked again, slicing low. Zuria jumped, her suit's servos lifting her just high enough to avoid the sweep. She landed, crouched, and aimed a knee into his abdomen. The crowd gasped. Ra stumbled back, breath caught. The fight continued, a storm of fury from the commander, matched by precision from Zu. He swung wide. She dodged tight. He went for strength. She fought with clarity. Zaraya wasn't the same as before. This wasn't brute strength or muscle memory. This was practiced patience, calculated movement. When Traz finally managed to knock her down with a shoulder charge, the crowd cheered, but Zaraya flipped backward, hands catching the floor, legs kicking him square in the chest. The impact sent him flying 5 meters. Jack grinned from the edge. She's dancing. Traz rose slower this time, his breath ragged, rage distorted, his face beneath the helmet. You think this makes you whole? He shouted. You're still broken. Zaraya said nothing. She stepped forward, no swagger, no performance, just purpose. Traz lunged for a final blow, halberd raised, battle cry. On his lips, Zaraya ducked, spun, and elbowed his knee joint. The armor cracked, he screamed. Another twist, and her suit locked his weapon's handle. She yanked. The halberd flew from his grip. In the same motion. She drove her palm into his chest plate, triggering an overload charge from her extra-core. A blue burst flashed as he was launched, backward into the arena wall, collapsing in a pile of dust and fractured pride. The arena fell silent. Zaraya didn't move, didn't pose. She just stood, chest rising slowly. Visor pulled back to reveal her face. Her eyes weren't angry, they were clear. She walked over to Traz, who groaned beneath shattered armor. Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth. He reached for a dagger. At his thigh, Zaraya kicked it away. He spat at her feet. Do it, he hissed. Kill me. Prove your strength. She stared at him, then leaned in close. I don't need to destroy you to win, she said. You already destroyed yourself the day you left me behind. And she walked away. The silence stretched on. Came a single clapped up, then another. Soon the entire arena erupted in applause, not the kind given out of tradition or pressure. It was thunderous, rising like a wave. Zaraya didn't turn back. She walked toward the exit gate, and Jack stood waiting for her. She stepped into the corridor, armor hissing as it released its tight hold on her limbs. Jack met her with a look halfway, between pride and awe. You didn't kill him, she nodded. Killing him would have proved nothing. You were brilliant. I was me, she said. Finally, they returned to the council chamber hours later. The room felt different now, less hostile, more watchful. The council sat upright, expressions unreadable. The head counselor rose. Zaraya of House Vorhe, he said. By right of ancient trial, your name is restored, your service record reinstated, your death report erased. The chamber murmured. Zuraya bowed her head, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. And your future? The counselor asked. What path do you seek? Zaraya lifted her gaze. I seek none. I walk it, wherever it leads. She turned to leave, then paused. But I will not walk it alone. Her eyes met Jack's. The chamber did not cheer. They stood, a wave of silent respect. That night, on the Luma Drift, Jack watched Zaraya remove her suit for the first time in weeks. Instead of her heavy armor, she wore lightweight braces. Not because she was weaker, but because she no longer needed to prove strength in weight. She moved slowly but freely, as the ship lifted away from the Zorak capital. She stood at the observation, windows, stars reflecting in her eyes. I'm not sure what's next, she said quietly. Jack joined her, their shoulders brushing. That's the best part, she smiled, and for the first time in her life, she whispered something she'd never dared before. Take me with you, Jack. He didn't answer with words. He just held her hand. The stars opened before them. Voices among the stars. The days that followed felt unreal, like echoes from a future neither of them had dared to dream. Zaraya's name returned to the records. Her face, once erased, now appeared on broadcast reels and official updates across the Zorak systems. News anchors spoke her name with caution, awe, and a hint of disbelief. Stories circulated. The fallen daughter who rose, the paralyzed general who walked again, the warrior reborn through fire and human will. But Zaraya didn't stay. She didn't crave parades or honors. She had stood, fought, and reclaimed what was stolen. Now she wanted peace. She and Jack returned to the Luma Drift, now modified with new engines, upgraded hull plating, and one particular corner turned into a small greenhouse Jack had built in secret, a place for things to grow. He said with a shrug. Zaraya found herself smiling more often. She walked without the full suit now, only needing minimal support. But even so, she still trained just in case. One quiet evening, as they drifted in the calm expanse between sectors, a priority distress signal flashed across the console. Jack muted it, almost instinctively, but Zaraya reached over and turned it back on. You're not curious? She asked. He raised a brow. It's probably pirates, she smirked. We've danced that dance before. He sighed dramatically and sat up straighter. You're starting to enjoy this? No, she replied. I'm starting to to remember who I was, and I want to use it to help people like you helped me. The coordinates were less than 6 hours away. The ship, according to the data burst, was human. A small academic cruiser, likely researchers or deep space biologists, non-combatants. They were being chased by mercenary raiders, the kind who didn't take prisoners, just data and fuel. Jack looked at Zariah. You sure? She nodded. Let's remind the galaxy what it means when a human and a so-called cripple team up. They arrived in deep orbit over a fractured moon. The academic vessel, a rounded, rust-stained ship with solar collectors, was limping. Engines flickering, outer hull torn open like paper. 2 pirate craft circled like wolves. Zariah launched. Jack provided cover fire. She struck hard and fast, her suit now custom-tuned to her movements like an extension of her thoughts. She darted along magnetic rails on the enemy hull, ripping open panels, disabling engines, and forcing surrender. Not a single death. After the skirmish, the grateful scientists offered her anything: supplies, compensation, recognition. Zariah asked only one thing: a recording, a small holographic interview, a chance to say what no one else had. They agreed. So she stood before the camera in her silver-trimmed suit, eyes steady, posture straight. She didn't read from a script. She didn't speak like a politician. She spoke like someone who remembered being forgotten. I was once called dead, broken, not by my enemies, but by my own kind. I was left behind, and I could have stayed silent. But one human believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. She looked directly into the lens. This galaxy is full of strength. But strength isn't about force or titles. It's about compassion. It's about standing when your legs shake. About choosing to protect when you have every reason to destroy. She paused. My name is Zariah of House Voorhe, and if you feel like you've been left behind, know this: your story isn't over. Not unless you let it be. The message was short, but it spread. The scientists, moved by her words, uploaded the clip to their networks. Within a week it went viral across both human and alien sectors. It was subtitled in 20 languages, replayed in academic halls, military bases, refugee stations, and even at border checkpoints where young recruits stood straighter after watching. Zariah had become a voice, not a soldier, a symbol, and Jack, he remained beside her, quiet, steady, building, modifying, listening. But one night, as they drifted above a gas giant, the stars glowing like ancient songs through the viewport, Zariah turned to him with a question. Why didn't you leave when it got hard? He blinked, caught off guard. You mean with you? She nodded. I was broken, angry, useless. So why stay? He smiled, just a little, because I saw someone who hadn't given up, even if she thought she had. I've seen heroes, real ones. They're not loud, they're not perfect. They just ... keep going. She stared at him, then slowly leaned her forehead against his. I want you to know something, she whispered. You didn't just save me, you reminded me I was never broken in the first place. His hand found hers. I never doubted it. They didn't kiss, they didn't cry, they just stayed like that, forehead to forehead, breathing quietly together while stars passed beyond the window like slow-moving fireflies. In the weeks that followed, more calls came in, ships in need, colonies in trouble, people forgotten by larger systems. Zariah and Jack answered everyone, not as soldiers, not as saviors, but as a reminder: humanity isn't defined by strength, it's defined by how we lift those who've fallen. And Zariah, she'd never fall again, not alone. A new legacy begins. It began with a whisper, not a scream, not a battle cry, but a quiet message carried across frequencies, translated across languages, and passed between broken transmitters on forgotten worlds. Zariah lives. And with that whisper, the galaxy changed. Jack and Zariah never planned to become symbols. They weren't royalty, or rebels, or saviors. But their story, a human who believed in a discarded alien girl, spread like a crack of light through the dark. Not because it was loud, but because it was real. Their ship, the Luma Drift, became more than a lifeline between stars. It became a place where the unwanted came to learn how to walk again, literally and figuratively. Refugees, exiles, forgotten veterans. Some arrived with scars, others with silence. All of them found something Zariah had once believed, lost. Hope. It was never easy. They didn't have a fleet. They weren't funded by governments or guilds. Supplies were scavenged, bought on the edge of legality, traded for repairs. Sometimes, they ran out of power in the cold of dead systems. Sometimes they were pursued by warlords or patrols looking to finish what others had started. But they always survived, because they had each other. One cycle, a young alien girl arrived at a fuel port in the neutral zone. She had no name, just numbers tattooed across her wrist. A former genetic experiment, cast out for being imperfect. She didn't speak for 3 days. On the 4th day, she stood outside Zoraya's quarters and asked, "How did you stop being scared?" Zoraya looked at her, looked, and remembered. The girl reminded her of herself, not in face or species, but in posture, in the way she held her hands like shields, in the way her silence screamed. Zoraya knelt down and placed her hand over the girl's. "I didn't," she said. "I learned how to live with it." The girl blinked, then whispered, "Can I learn it too?" And that became Zoraya's purpose. Not revenge, not glory, but rebuilding. Teaching others that walking didn't start with legs, it started with belief. 1 year later, an invitation arrived. It bore the seal of the Unified Council of Outer Species. A new coalition formed in response to a growing movement, one inspired by Zoraya's message, and the humans who stood beside her. Jack read the message aloud. "You are formally invited to the new Concord Summit, where matters of sentient worth and legacy will be re-evaluated by shared galactic law. Attendance of General Zura of House Vorhe and her human companion is requested." Zora stared at it for a long moment. "It's happening," she murmured. Jack looked up. "What is?" She turned to him, eyes soft. "They're listening." He smiled. "So what now? We go in and change the galaxy?" She chuckled. "We already did." At the summit, no one clapped when Zoraya entered. They stood. Every representative human, Zorak, Ulinary, Draxians, and even the elusive Sin, to their feet. It wasn't ceremony, it was acknowledgement. She gave no speech. She didn't need to. They all knew Zoraya and Jack didn't stay long at the summit. There were too many places to go. Too many people still waiting. They weren't built for politics, they were built for motion, for movement, for healing. One day, much later, while drifting through the stars near a quiet binary system, Zura stood at the viewing deck, watching 2 suns dance around each other. Jack approached, a mug of synth tea in hand. She smiled at him. He leaned beside her. "You ever think about how it all started?" she asked. He shrugged. "I found a girl who couldn't walk." Zoraya laughed. "I was a wreck." "You were hurt," he corrected. "There's a difference." She turned toward him. "Do you think, if you hadn't stopped that day, I'd be alive right now?" Jack didn't answer immediately. Then, slowly, he said, "Maybe, but I don't think you'd be you." She nodded, her eyes misty. "I'm glad I met you, Jack." He tilted his head. "Zura, I didn't save you, I just refused to leave." And for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, quietly, Zoraya asked the question she had been afraid of for so long. "Do you still see me as broken?" He reached out and gently took her hand. "No," he said. "I see you as the strongest soul I've ever known." She leaned against him, and together, they watched the twin stars glow. In time, the Luma Drift became more than a ship. It became a myth, a floating home for those who had nowhere else to go. A sanctuary that asked for no history, only heart. Some came paralyzed, others wounded by loss or betrayal, but all left walking taller. Zoria never called herself a hero, but those who met her called her something more powerful. Proof. Proof that one voice matters. Proof that love can rebuild what war destroys. Proof that even in a galaxy that forgets, humanity remembers. The final message from Zoria, recorded many cycles later, was short. Her hair had silver streaks. Her suit was in the background, untouched for weeks. She looked straight into the camera and said, "They once called me broken, but a human called me worth it, and that saved me." Then she smiled and added, "Wherever you are, keep going. Your story isn't over. Not yet."